Got an update for you on New York's hero resistance governor Andrew Cuomo and his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Oh, look at that. 9 top New York health officials have quit as Cuomo scorns expertise. That subhead is also really important. When I say experts in air quotes, it sounds like I'm saying I don't really trust the experts because I don't, Sagar.
This guy is literally the liberal Trump. So here to discuss is Jennifer Holdsworth Karp, Democratic strategist, owner of JC Strategies, and Rachel Bovard, she's senior director of policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, 2 great friends of the show. Jen, let me start with you. This has always been a fascinating dynamic that we've observed here on Cuomo, which is that, look, I mean, on a policy level, he has done some disastrous things, but has really paid no price for it, both in the media and, as referencing before this conversation, his own voters. He actually has quite a high approval rating in the state of New York. What do you make of this situation and this walk of this mass resignation by some of the top health officials in the state?
So I think this wasn't discussed in the proper context. There's a difference between experts and bureaucrats. A number of the folks that left were frustrated with things that weren't actually happening in the way that they want it to happen. And yes, they are experts in their particular field, but a lot of it was government red tape. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that these folks left the administration. They were serving as roadblocks to getting things done. But the language that the governor used was just a disaster. How, after we resoundingly kicked Donald Trump out of office for not listening to experts, could you even say that you, as a government official, don't believe the experts? This was a disaster in terms of messaging and framing. And I think it's going to haunt him in the coming weeks and months.
I mean, that is the thing, Rachel. Like, look, I'm not inside those meetings. I don't know if what the experts were saying was the right thing or what Cuomo was saying was the right thing. They don't go into a lot of detail in this article about exactly where the rub was, but a couple of things. Number one, we know that both some of the decision-making around nursing homes was disastrous, and that actually a report has come out now from the Democratic Attorney General saying they undercounted nursing home deaths by nearly 50%. Okay, we know that. We also know that the initial vaccine rollout was a total catastrophe, and that was apparently where some of the disagreement initially with the experts in the administration ultimately were. But more to the point, like, if you sub Trump into this headline, it sounds exactly like the kind of thing that CNN would have lost their absolute shit over and had a week-long temper tantrum about. But instead, we know, of course, what did CNN do with Governor Cuomo? They had him interviewed by his brother in prime time in these like absurdly chummy softball situations so that, you know, we didn't really get a full picture of what was going on in that state at a critical time.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this headline was, oh, are we allowed to criticize Andrew Cuomo now? Has it come to this? You know, we're allowed to do this. Like Jake Tapper, CNN's Precious Flower, is allowed to say something bad about Andrew Cuomo. It's just, you know, look, again, to your point, at any time, questioning the experts has gotten you kicked off social media, roundly mocked, told that you're, you know, killing grandma, and suddenly like the tables have turned. And, you know, I just think his 68% approval rating in New York, I have to say, I think New Yorkers have just sort of, they're almost Russian now in their ability to just cope with absurdity, right? They just take it. And I think that's like what's happening a little bit, having talked to my own family a couple of times that live there. But I mean, this guy, he wrote a book about his own leadership abilities when thousands and thousands and thousands of people died because of them. You just don't get any more narcissistic than this. He might have actually topped Trump. I have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did he say? Don't get cocky with COVID, Jen. He said, right. don't get cocky. Never get cocky with COVID. I always say that after we put up the mural that his own state health department made here about his victory over it. I mean, just broadly, yeah, as you could say here, now Jake Tapper is going off on him. I mean, what do you make of this, Jen? Because it, as you said, on a messaging front, it's broadly hypocritical, but I think it's a media story too. I mean, CNN literally had his own brother making jokes with Cuomo at the height of this pandemic and not critically, not at the same time asking him tough questions. And I don't think I think that makes a lot of their stuff hollow whenever it comes to their criticism.
Yeah, well, I'm not about to go as far as the false equivalence of comparing him to Trump. Okay. Governor Cuomo believes in science and he believes in wearing masks and he believes in social distancing and is not being irresponsible in terms of messaging like that. But there's no question that there's been absolutely questionable decisions all along the way in New York. I had to go up there a number of months ago for an unavoidable business meeting. I got up there, I quarantined for 2 weeks. I took a COVID test, so there were processes in place to prevent this. But I think this is a massive PR problem. I couldn't agree with you more that the leadership book is beyond ridiculous, that heads into Trump territory. But I think that his handling of the pandemic in New York, once we knew what we were dealing with, right? We also have to acknowledge that New York, Seattle, California dealt with this before the rest of the country did. So we were off to the races for about 6 weeks before anybody knew what was happening. Perhaps some of these experts should have focused on their own failures instead of coming for the governor. But I'm not about to defend the PR tour that the governor went on in order to discuss the pandemic. I think that his administration should have buckled down and paid attention a little harder as it was getting worse in the summer and then worse headed into the holidays. So if I was advising Governor Cuomo, which I never have, I would tell him, how about we lay off TV for a while and focus?
Indeed. Just to close this out, because I think it's important to have some of these details in here. One of the pieces that the New York Times criticizes is they say that the state designated as a regional vaccination hub in New York City, not the city's 6,000 person health department, but rather the Greater New York Hospital Association, a trade group with a multi-million-dollar lobbying arm that had been a major donor to the governor's causes. How about that, Sagar?
Yeah, yikes. Mega yikes whenever it comes to that. Okay, guys. All right. We could talk about this all day, and maybe we will next time. Stick with us. We'll have more Rising right after this.